Hey, have you ever wondered why people post on LinkedIn besides just a random boost in ego and confidence and wanting to brag to others and making up fake stories? There is actually some reason behind it. I started posting on LinkedIn years ago, mainly just I would read articles. If I enjoyed them, I thought maybe some other people would join them, I would share them. So we have a content creator group within gaming, people who take their content seriously and all do it for a purpose, for a message. So I wanted to get a few of those people together, some people I really look up to, Phil and Erin, and talk about why do they use LinkedIn, what's their content strategy, what's the long-term play here. For me, it's helped me drive millions of dollars worth of sales, and for them, it's also had fantastic benefits, so it's exactly what we talk about. Enjoy.
Hello. Good to see you here, Chris.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. What's the weather like in sunny LA right now?
You know, it's not bad. I grew up in Michigan where it was cold, so here it's like I wake up and it's 45-degree weather, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying. But it's been heating up to the 60s. So in LA, it's freezing, but I shouldn't complain. How about you?
Yeah, LA has something against me, man. I've not once been to LA and it's been warm.
That's shocking.
I've been in fall, I've been in summer.
Of our time.
Yeah. I don't know why it hates
I'm sorry,
me. And
you
San
must
Diego,
just be cursed.
Yeah, exactly. And San Diego is always warm when I go there, so it's obviously trying to show off.
San Diego's beautiful. Sometimes when LA is really hard, especially the entertainment industry, I'm like, I should just move to San Diego. Still great tech scene, good gaming scene. There's lots of brands there. And then I just don't have to deal with the LA stuff, you know?
Exactly, man. I do a bit of jiu-jitsu, and San Diego is a pretty home of jiu-jitsu as well. So you got Jocko Willing's gym there. It's a good place to be if you want to train as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Comic-Con, you know? Comic-Con.
Yeah. TwitchCon, you got that as well? That's why I was there anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, VidCon,
So what's been going on?
VidCon was there, 3 years ago? Something like that. But yeah, I loved having VidCon there. It was cool.
Yeah, nice. I don't know if you saw, just as we're waiting for Erin to come in, FaZe just dropped a second Disney collab this morning. They got some mouse pads, hoodies, shirts, keycaps. Yeah,
that's
really interesting.
Awesome. Please let that make the stock price go up. Please, for the sake of all of us in this room, please.
I was going to say, man, are you an investor? Just please.
No, I'm not an investor, but as somebody who understands that they're in a way a representative of the entire market to real bag holders, you have to cheer for everybody in the space, because if, like, let's say FaZe hit the stock market and just went astronomical, suddenly there'd be so much more money in our market that it would be like, so I'm still cheering them on from the sidelines.
Yeah, well, I guess your wishes have kind of come true. It's up 23.5% today. So,
oh, thank God. Thank God.
So not going too bad.
Hey, how's it going? Can everyone hear me?
You bet.
Yes. What's been going on in your world, Erin?
Oh man, what has been? My world includes many facets of the entertainment industry. In terms of esports, our Apex team's competing right now. It's Black History Month, and I'm excited for the initiative that we have at XSET that we're pushing. And then this Friday, I'm doing some work for NASCAR. I'm hosting a panel talking about technology being implemented towards live events and increasing engagement from viewers in live events. So it's a pretty busy week, nonetheless.
Yeah, damn. I mean, you're wearing probably more hats than Phil and I put together, and I feel like Phil and I already wear enough hats. So
True.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something I'm definitely going to touch on in this conversation a little bit later on, but I have a great team around me that helps to keep me organized. Plus, I use Notion. Notion is a godsend when it comes to keeping things organized. That and Monday.
Yeah, very true. I mean, we may as well go into it, right? We don't have a script, so I don't have much set out. So probably to frame that into a question would be interesting to hear, like, what's behind both of your LinkedIns for both you, Phil, and Erin? Like, obviously, you're the face of it. I assume you're the one that's doing most of the content creation and curation. But like you said, Erin, you've got a team that you work with.
Oh,
yeah. I mean,
go first.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, great. Yeah, what goes into it is really my own anger when reading the trades, or my own excitement. I guess it's just about emotional response, right? Because I really started hitting LinkedIn hard 2016, 2017. It was my 2016 2016 to 17 New Year's resolution to post every day. And that's when I really started going hardcore on LinkedIn. And my strategy back then, which is still my strategy now, is read the trades, find an article that I have an emotional response to, and then post about it, and then write a kind of micro blog about why I'm having that emotional response. So I've never had writers for mine. It's just like I get really angry or really excited or really happy or really sad about something, and then I just post it and say why. And I think that part of the resonance and why it's worked so well is because a lot of people leave emotion out of LinkedIn, and they just kind of like put up stats or or inspiration porn or whatever. Whereas I really lean into it. Like, this makes me mad. This is why I'm scared for the future. And I just put up one about AI and why it scares me. And really vibrant comment section. Some people saying I'm an idiot, but that fuels, that fuels conversation. So it's really just about me and reading the trades. I wish there was more magic than that.
Yeah, I think for me, it started, the content that I was putting on LinkedIn, I started in esports in terms of just being a broadcaster. So for those of you who have been in esports for a while, remember back in the day, I hosted the show Cheddar Esports. And so a lot of that was a lot of information that we were distributing through, obviously, like interviewing people. And I would post those clips on LinkedIn because I was a firm believer of, posting the content everywhere and anywhere and seeing how it resonates. And then over time, not only the functionalities of what I do has changed over time, but also just like the overall brand that I have. So I started, even before esports, I started in general entertainment. I worked in sports, I worked in the music industry, I worked in TV, and then eventually I ended up in front of the camera. And so I started posting a lot of that. And then eventually, even though I'm young, like I'm only 30 years old, I definitely have quote unquote veteran experience working in entertainment for 13 plus years. I started actually when I was 17. And so a lot of the information that I've gained and obtained, what I started to see in just general entertainment is that it's no longer just siloed. Everything is interconnected. And so I was like, you know what? This is actually the perfect time for me to start posting a lot of like my perspectives, my opinions, and also a little bit of my journey too, because I basically have been able to tap into all different facets of entertainment that is connected to gaming, but then also, I'm able to have conversations about non-gaming things because I've worked in other areas. And so because not a lot of people know that side of me, and a good amount of people have been introduced to me from what I do in esports and gaming. And so I started to do a quote unquote rebrand, and I started talking of course I still talk about esports and gaming because I own companies in this space, but also I started opening up a lot more and focusing on more of the human experience of what happens when you're an entrepreneur, and also an entrepreneur who's a talent. It's a very, very unique angle that not a lot of people can post about, and post at the, at a place where you're at such a high level where me and my team have worked for me to get to as a broadcaster. And so I really just focus in on now what are the expertise and what are the knowledge and information I know and have from experience. What are my actual experience that could resonate with other people? And then also, what's the angle of me being a talent executive, an executive talent, which is a very unique angle, and provides multiple viewpoints when it comes to things like branding and marketing and content, because I understand being a talent and dealing with brands. And so I was like, okay, if I'm that person, I can talk to brands about how to better deal with talent and how to better deal with certain things. So I just really just pushed on my strengths, and I also just focus on being relatable too. Like, I'm not someone who, I want people to feel like I'm someone that they can talk to, someone who is like a regular old person, And so that's what I kind of started implementing into my content, and not worrying about, okay, is this going to be a banger and get me a lot of views? Because some of the biggest brand deals I've gotten has come from content that actually didn't get the most amount of views.
Yeah, it's funny. Two things that you both said there. Well, actually, I guess one of the main things that you said there is just talk like a real person. That's pretty much what both of you said. And I know Phil said it more directly because we all see this so often on LinkedIn. And I think when I started pushing pretty hard on it back in 2019, up until today, 2018, 2019 time, started posting a lot more. What I noticed is that most people just don't even talk like a real person on LinkedIn. They talk like a business robot or a business AI who's talking like how they think a business person should talk. I think when you see someone's content who actually looks like a real person and talks like a real person, it just has so much more cut through, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's the opportunity in LinkedIn, like with all new platforms, is people really, and not that it's a new platform, but like newly hot in the creator sector platform, I suppose I'll say. But people kind of start by mimicking what other people are doing. Like if you remember YouTube in 2005, 2006, nobody quite knew what to do. They were putting up like videos of their family and then it was really Lonely Girl, that show that really blew up vlogging because they realized somebody who's a kid in their bedroom could talk to the camera, and then everyone started replicating that, and then pranks started picking up, and then like Let's Play stuff, early FaZe Clan people, right? So it's like you can't really be what you can't see. And I feel like so much of early LinkedIn was just inspiration porn and self-branding and back padding. Like that was very version one. And now who you're seeing break through are people who are like, look, I'm a DA, and this is what my day looks like, and these are my concerns, and it just makes people feel like, oh, this is a little bit different. This has value emotionally on top of being educational, and that's what's going to get you kind of that lean in following.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I always say like every platform has its specific formats and it has the things that it does well, right? It's interesting because now I'm starting to see a lot of people utilizing similar formats that Justin Welsh does. And I think he's been able to find a good formula that can be applied to what everyone else does, but also more specifically himself. But what I always say, to people is like, take a format, see what other people are doing well, but apply it to your own voice and the way you go about things. So, for example, for me, I best convey things on video. That's why I'm a broadcaster. I'm able to get people pulled into what I'm saying via video. So yeah, there's occasionally sometimes I'll do more copy-based content, but I really push heavy into video because that is my strength. And when you start to kind of focus on, even strengths is like how you present the content. Some people are really great at copy. Some people are really great in audio only. And some people are amazing in video. And you have to really figure out what that form is. And you focus on creating the content that can still be pushed and elevated based upon just the fundamentals of what works well on the platform. But at the end of the day, you are you, and there's only one of you on this planet. And so it's just taking what you see others do and kind of reformat it into the style and in the editing style or the way you present it that works for you. And you don't have to keep, not everyone has to do what Gary Vaynerchuk does. Not everyone has to do what Justin Welsh does. It's, what you could take from it is just learning how they format it for specific platforms or understanding like, hey, this is typically a B2B platform. So how do you kind of shift conversations, even if it's a B2C convo, how do you shift it to create more awareness for B2B? And so, starting out, it's like, you shouldn't worry too much about like, oh, I got to format it be a certain way. I have to edit a certain way. I have to write a certain way. Just focus on being you and putting the voice out in the best way you can. And then you just start fine tuning it to be fitting for what the platform is.
So, people will post on Twitter to usually get more exposure to bring people across to their Twitch or to sell their course or something like that. People post on YouTube to get direct brand deals and ad deals and money from AdSense to, be able to buy the Lamborghini they've always wanted. The question for both of you is, why are you posting on LinkedIn? What's the goal for you here?
I'll let you go first, Erin. I feel like we should switch up, so I'm not always answering first.
Okay. No worries. Either way, I have no problem with that. So the reason I posted on LinkedIn is because when I first started in the gaming space, I realized how many professionals and especially the decision makers really dislike Twitter. And they actually are more accessible on here. So when I started recognizing that, I started utilizing the platform and posting on here as a way to introduce people to me. And then I also would utilize the content to see who would engage with it and then reach out to those people and start building a relationship and building my network as well. Because, network building is one of the most crucial elements of content creation and building, your brand and platform. And so I realized at the time there was a void when it came to conversations about esports and gaming on the platform. So then I just started posting and just repurposing content that I had on Twitter, but thought it was valuable for the platform. So it was really for me to get close to a lot of the check cutters and decision makers and people who really look for talent in this space for projects and initiatives. And then eventually I started posting to then continue to just, I don't really like to say it a thought leader. I think there's maybe an idea driver or discussion driver, but I decided that I wanted to be someone who's more like that. And so I started posting more content like that to help drive discussions and to help drive productive change in the industry as a whole.
I like that idea driver. That's way better because I've always hated the term thought leader too, because it's like Orwellian in a weird way. Like
Cult leader.
lead. Yeah, exactly. Cult leaders are all real. They're like the original thought leaders if you think about it. No, and the reason why I started really leaning into LinkedIn, I actually have a very specific day where I decided I was going to start leaning into LinkedIn because it was sometime in December 2016. I went to conference number 10 million that I've gone to in my life and realized that I'm shyer than most of the people in the room at networking events. And networking face-to-face is never going to be my thing, right? In fact, a lot of people, when they meet me after only knowing me on LinkedIn, are like, wow, you're so much different on LinkedIn. It's like, yeah, I'm just better when I'm writing than I am when I'm talking face-to-face. I like to think things through. I feel more free to express myself. So I figured, well, if I'm never going to be like the world's best networker face-to-face, then how do I still keep moving my career forward? And LinkedIn was right here for me. So that's really when I decided to start posting. And yeah, deal flow was a little hard to come by before. I had to kind of depend on my case studies and my expertise, but not always on my charm in those situations, or I depended on introductions from mutual friends in order to get business going. But now on LinkedIn, I can depend a little bit more on LinkedIn. And now that a lot of people know me as like a creator economy guy, or, somebody who can help with Web3 things if they've got questions about it, or in the gaming space, a lot of times my deal flow starts with somebody just DMing me and saying, hey, I've got a question, or hey, can you look at this deck, or hey, do you have any influencers who would do this for this budget? And then it turns into a multi-year relationship where I'm running all of their influencer marketing or connecting them to big game companies or whatever. So yeah, it really all started with my own personal self-consciousness about how I network.
Actually, so true. I ask myself that question sometimes too. I'm at events, and unless people are approaching me, and kind of just, I feel like I'm standing there awkwardly off the side, and I'm like, "What is wrong with me?"
Doesn't it feel like everybody in the world is more charming than you sometimes? I mean, I don't think Erin has this problem because Erin seems like more of an extrovert, but like sometimes I go to these events and I'm like, "How is it so easy for everyone else? Like, does everybody here know each other but me?"
No, Phil. You know what's really funny? I'm actually an introvert. I'm not an extrovert.
That's why you're in gaming. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, I've just had to learn how to push through it from broadcasting. It's actually funny enough. There's various different creators who are introverts, but you would never know because of how they present themselves externally. But it's kind of like, I always tell people, like, it's kind of like how when you have actors, they have to, turn the switch on and play a specific character. I wouldn't say I'm playing a character. I'm playing myself. But it's the same kind of concept of, like, quote unquote, getting into the zone and preparing for when I have to be social. So I go through that similar kind of process myself.
That makes total sense. I was one of my deep dark secrets. I was a stand-up comedian for a long time, despite being an introvert. And part of it is just because my goal was to be a comedy writer, right? That's what I went to college for, not for the comedy part, but for the writer part. And I kind of had to force myself to go do it so that I could learn that skill. And the only way that I could do it was by pretending I was a character or playing a role of like, all right, I'm playing the stand-up comedian guy, right? And sometimes I do find myself doing that when I'm in public places and I have to be a certain thing of like, all right, I'm going to put on the character of being a lecturer. And then that's the only way that I can survive getting through like a speaking engagement.
Pretty funny. Yeah, I guess that makes sense for me too. Like if I'm put in that situation, it's pretty easy for me. Like if I'm hosting the meetup or I'm the person talking on stage or something like that, it's pretty easy. But when you're just the random person going to a meet and greet for someone else, yeah, you're right. It becomes a bit different. And I guess to answer my own question too, the reason I started posting on LinkedIn was to get brand deals for my marketing agency. And I can say like, from when I started posting on LinkedIn until today, LinkedIn has honestly been responsible for either directly or indirectly for somewhere around 90% of all the revenue I've ever made in my business, which is, millions of dollars today, obviously given the title from this. So, my current investors, Playside Studios, Australia's largest public listed games development company, the CEO, Jerry, reached out to me off LinkedIn. My largest ever client deal I sold for $2 million last year. That was someone who reached out to me on LinkedIn when they were frustrated. They couldn't do good deals with creators and wanted to reach out to me for help. And, I think like 9 out of 10 of my largest deals have all directly been through people messaging me. Like it's all inbound as well on LinkedIn. I haven't had, personally, I've had zero success with outbound on LinkedIn, even using external people to try to help me. But making that content, making people come to me, it's a very easy formula of people will be browsing LinkedIn. They'll say, hey, this Chris guy posts a lot about gaming, Web3, blockchain, esports, whatever it is. He seems to know what he's talking about. I got a problem that I need solved. Maybe I should reach out to him, have a bit of a chat, and, it goes from there.
That's really interesting too, especially because you're in such a specific market, right? Being Australian in esports. Because I feel like, and maybe Erin can sympathize with this, like in so many of the major cities in America, you can't throw a rock without hitting somebody in esports. So do you think that's part of the success too, is just like territorially you can be a bit more of an industry expert?
I think so. I mean, I'm just trying to think like number of clients wise, probably 80% of my number of clients have come from outside of Australia, and monetarily wise, 99.9%, I think, of my money has come from outside of Australia as a whole. Sometimes I can use it to get deals here, but I mean, it's exactly the same as my investors' Playside. They're, like I said, they're Australia's largest publicly listed games development company. But if you look at their work for hire projects and who they work with and the big names, it's all Hollywood studios, it's Meta, is in Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very similar for them and for TJ, who's their head of sales, who's a co-director in my business, who, has to fly over to the US to kind of close those deals a lot of the time. So yeah, it's still a very US focus for me. I mean, I was in the US 3 times last year. And obviously that's when we caught up, right, for dinner, Phil. So, have to head over there a lot, but man, it's hard to leave Australia. It's nice here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's even, and I kind of relate to you, Chris, because my work has now, grown outside of just the cities. It's grown outside of New York City. It's grown outside of LA. Now it's like having to balance, finding that optimal time for your audience and where your audience predominantly is, which of course my audience predominantly is on, Eastern and Pacific time. So finding the right times for that on this platform. But also, I know this is something that you started doing, which is, posting 2 times a day. I know for some people that absolutely works. And then for some like myself, I actually only post once just so I can focus on consistency. But then I also utilize some of the posts that I have and some of the other, the projects that I do off the platform and creating kind of like a cross-functional component of it. So like if I'm hosting something that's more international time, which is sometimes I do that, I'll make note of it on LinkedIn and then having people be able to check that out. Or sometimes I use the conversations that I have off the platform and pointing to LinkedIn so that, I can fuel the content a little bit more without having to feel like I have to post a lot. And I'm actually curious to hear about both your cadences, because I'll be honest, I don't have enough time in the day to post more than once, just because like if I'm not being a talent, I'm helping to run 2 companies, potentially 3. So also want to get your guys' thoughts on like how you found what kind of cadence works for you 2 individually.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that I'm keeping up the cadence that I should be keeping up, but I was daily for a long time. And then marriage, kid number 1, kid number 2, startup. It just kind of started slipping, and now I'm at like 2 or 3 times a week. I'd really like to get back to daily, but I have my son doesn't sleep very well, so he's up at 5. So like I lost my morning posting time I used to have. Um, but I think that now that there's a lot more people creating on LinkedIn, and it seems like the algorithm's starting to prefer people who are, LinkedIn, more aggressive on LinkedIn, it feels like the people who are really popping are doing a couple times a day. Unfortunately, I just don't have time for it, but I want to get back there. Maybe when the kids are a little older and they can get themselves their own food from the fridge, that'll change.
Yeah, for me, it goes through in cycles. Like at one stage when I was posting my most amount of content, I did a bit of A/B test around this, and I'll probably get the years wrong, but I think it was 2019. I started posting once per day. 2021, I started posting twice per day and a lot more content, including my podcast, etc. And then I looked at the numbers compared, and it was something like, plus 45% posts for only like plus 8% reach and engagement. And I know that reach and engagement is generally like a vanity metric in most other platforms, but because my content is so niche and so specific, it's actually a perfect indicator for me as to whether I'm reaching the right people or not. So I found that kind of fatigue, I guess, with the algorithm. But it's hard because, as we know, like LinkedIn has been feeding us info because we're all part of the creator program. And this is for everyone else to know too. LinkedIn is changing its algorithm a lot away from people posting these stupid, annoying fake stories, or someone getting a new job, getting 3,000 likes just because it's a new job. And they're going much more towards like educational content, storytelling, and teaching people some other things. So for me, still, I try to post twice a day. So I'd say I probably post 5 to 6 times per week as a whole. And that's kind of like the maximum for me in the algorithm. And the answer I find is just so different for everyone. Like my LinkedIn creator manager kept telling me to go back to posting once per day, but I found a negative correlation between that. I know some other people like Phil, like what you said, have great success with posting 2 to 3 times a week. And same with Jeff Paz from Loaded, right? And X Phase, he posts, I think, anywhere between 1 to 3 times a week, and those posts go well for him. Similar with Jonas Gunderson as well, the COO of NIP or NIP. He'll post often 2 to 4 times per week as well, and they'll go quite well. But the difference between like a lot of your posts, right, Phil, and Jonas's versus mine is that mine are often quick takes or here's a summary of information, where I know that yours and Jonas's, et cetera, are much more around like storytelling. There's a lesson to be learned from here with a lot of that passion behind it, just like you said. So for anyone listening and they're, maybe saying, well, I'm not a famous stage presenter like Erin, I don't have decades of experience like Phil working for companies like Facebook or running most startups, and, I haven't been around, and I'm not an esports dinosaur like Chris, what the hell do I do? My answer is post literally anything. Like 99.9% of people don't post on LinkedIn at all because I think they're super scared that it's going to make them look dumb and it's, going to somehow impact them negatively, which is not true at all. Most people just read. Most people read and like, and then even less people, read, like, and then comment on something. And then even less people, again, read, like, comment, and then actually post something themselves. The whole way that I started on LinkedIn was I figured out, I said to myself, hey, if I read an article online about my industry and it gave me something interesting, something important, probably the same for someone else. So literally all I started doing was I would read an article online. I would go, that's interesting. I would share it on LinkedIn, provide a little bit of a summary, and off you go. Like that's how I probably made most of my first 200 posts on LinkedIn, besides, every now and then talking about like, here's an event I'm at, or, does anyone have a contact at Razer, or, something else along those lines too. But really my advice boiled down once again for you, just to be very clear, is just post anything on LinkedIn. If you read an article that's interesting, post it. If you see a cool merch collab drop from an esports team that you enjoy, post it. If you're going to an event, post it. Just post something, anything, even if it's once a week. even if it's 3 times a month, you're still posting 1,000,000% more, infinite percent more than most other people post. And then you can start to find your cadence from there and what you would like to do. When I was posting enough/too much, like when I was reaching the fatigue, and this is when kind of we were at a peak of running our LinkedIn. This goes back to the first question I asked. Behind my LinkedIn was obviously me doing all the copy and the strategy. Then I had Bax, who's my right-hand man. He's our head of socials and head of digital creatives. He was helping to control a video editor. He was doing a lot of the editing of our podcast and clips. And then also Chaos, or Julia, who's our graphics artist as well. And I was doing 14 posts per week. And this is when LinkedIn or any social media becomes kind of like a maths equation. So I had a maximum of 14 posts per week. I'd post at 1 a.m. and 8 a.m. Australian time, which is somewhere around 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. LA time, somewhere around that. Out of those 14 posts per week, 7 of them would be news/industry updates, so sharing and summarizing news that were happening. That means I have 7 left. Generally, 2 of those would be short form videos. That means I've got 5 posts left. 1 of them would be some sort of personal anecdote or story, so I've got 4 posts left. And then the last 4 would be made up of random things based on like memories in the past, events or things I'm going to, shouting out other people, or, you know, just some general other stuff that comes into my mind. But once again, post something, post anything, please. You're already ahead of most people if you do that.
Yeah. And if you don't, I would like to add one more thing too, is like also know your why. Like if you just want to just post work updates and you get a new job, by all means, go ahead. If you want to use it just to network and you want to spend more time just responding to other people's posts versus you posting, that's completely okay. I think ultimately at the end of the day, you just have to figure out what your why is. So, and then that is going to help to drive a lot of what you do. And, you know, on top of that too, if you have a product, and when I mean product, it could be a podcast or it could be a video series or anything like that. Like you could always just focus on creating content that helps, supplemental content that helps to support that product on the platform versus having to always think of like new things to post every week. Because that's one thing that I actually have been working on and doing is creating, I'm creating a series that I'm going to be utilizing to post on this platform. So then I automatically will have at least 3 posts per week. And then from there, anything that's trending or anything that's newsworthy, I can actually spend time to think about do I want to post this? Am I interested? Is this connected to like my why, like why I'm using LinkedIn, but also the why of like my brand, who is Erin Ashley Simon? And so, you know, you don't always, even if your cadence is once a week or once every other week, or maybe you don't want to post and maybe you're finding other ways to monetize opportunities via LinkedIn, just know what your why is, and that should help to drive everything else for you.
No, I love that. And it's so true. Like, unfortunately, we live in a world where we're all brands. Right. You know, when we're putting ourselves out there in social media, you have to know your personal why, and then how your content funnels through that why, and then the why of why somebody would follow you, which I feel like is the biggest why people miss on LinkedIn. Because I see some people who are very smart people who use LinkedIn just to backpat. They just are congratulating themselves on everything they do. Now, they're not thinking about the why of their audience of like, well, why do I want to watch somebody brag, right? It's like being cornered by the guy at the party who's talking about how nice of a car they drive. Like, nobody wants to sit and listen to that person. So if you want to, you know, appeal to a certain type of person, then what does that type of person want to see, right? And how can you give them something of value so that they go, wow, you know, Phil gave me something of value. Maybe I'll give him something of value back, like business or economic opportunity, right? I mean, when I look at the why, for me, my why is really, I need other people to provide education to me for digital things because I am not 16 anymore. So my why, first and foremost, is about learning on LinkedIn because I realize I'm a 40-year-old in a digital industry that's heavily run by 25-year-olds. And then it's kind of like the secondary stuff is the economic opportunity, everything. I need to know what these gamers, what these game companies are doing because I don't have time to play every video game anymore. I'll find time for Hogwarts Legacy, but for most games, I will not find the time to play those games anymore. So, yeah, being able to funnel that through and knowing why somebody's following you, like the economic opportunity will come. You just have to, provide as much value as you can to the audience that you want to reach.
The hardest thing is too, right, Phil? I'm sure you can resonate with this too, Erin. Is how long it takes. Like it takes a long time. I remember being much younger and newer into the industry. Like when I quit Corsair to go out on my own in 2018. And I remember just having meeting after meeting after meeting with people on LinkedIn without really understanding why, just wanting to reach them and just hoping, begging I would somehow blow them away to be able to make a sale, and then just being frustrated day after day, having meeting after meeting where, yeah, get along with the person, but there's not really an angle there to make some money out of them, and just thinking like, how the hell am I ever going to make this consultancy thing work? And then I had exactly this happen with someone where, we kind of had a deal that we were talking about in like 2019. It didn't come to fruition. And then in 2022, I signed the second biggest deal I've ever done with exactly that person. So sometimes it just takes a while for these things to mature and to come around. And that's the hardest thing when someone wants to reach out to me and ask like, oh, how can I start making content on LinkedIn? How can I get as many views as quickly as Jake Lucky and start, winning all these deals? And my answer often is like, it's not sexy. It's not like you're going to go viral overnight like you can on TikTok. A lot of the time it's a long play, but it's really worth it when you finally get there in the end.
Also, another thing too is, we definitely all deal with the comparison bug, but the one thing I want to let everyone know, because I work with so many different talent and creators, whether broadcasting, activations, for XSET, for Padia, for all, right? You'd be surprised how often the people who actually have a lot of numbers aren't always the people that are making the most money in deals. And I know it's crazy to say, but like, I definitely have had conversations with people who, absolutely get more numbers and engagement than I do on social media. But when we had actual conversations about brand deals, I ended up actually having more brand deals and having greater revenue coming in than they did. So sometimes when we look at social media and we look at the engagement that people have, at the end of the day, that engagement and that number is only as good as how that creator properly sets up their business in behind the scenes and properly sets it up for, what is the value proposition for what I'm doing that can help me get deals. Or maybe they are going one way and getting massive amount of engagement, but then they realize that they have to start taking another direction, which we actually start seeing with top creators. That's happening to them. It's that adaptability. All of the successful creators have adaptability. And so some talent are realizing that, yeah, I'm getting a lot of numbers, I'm getting a lot of viewers, but I'm not really doing a good job monetizing, or I'm struggling to monetize it. So I have to kind of make an adjustment from a business perspective. So I always tell people that, like, even though big numbers is a shiny thing and it's, numbers do help with deals, just know that just because someone has a lot of engagement and a lot of numbers, it doesn't always mean that they're making a lot of deals in the back end.
This is always my favorite conversation, especially with creators, because it's like about how fandom isn't monolithic, right? Like if you think about somebody that followed PewDiePie in 2006 when they were 13 and now they're, 31 and maybe haven't watched his videos in 10 years, it still shows up on the platform as one subscriber, right? So if somebody's like casually watching a video in the background, or, they're watching a piece of clickbait where they don't even know who the creator is, or if it's somebody who's living and dying by this person's content and like hangs their pictures all over their locker, that still looks like one view, right? So numbers can be incredibly deceiving and data can make you very dumb in this space. And the best way to build relationships on something like LinkedIn is the best way you create human relationships, which is having a conversation, being respectful, like making sure everyone knows your value, make sure you're respecting their value. That's why one of the things that I tell people to do most on LinkedIn is like spend some time in your comment sections. Like when somebody takes the time to comment, like it. If somebody asks you a question, answer it. If somebody is a second level connection, and they leave a really thoughtful comment under your post, connect with them with the note saying, hey, I thought that was a really insightful comment. I don't want anything from you. I just think that you're an interesting person. Send, right? Maybe 2 years from now, they'll go, actually, Phil, I was just searching for, gaming talent and you came about and I need this and this and this. So, it doesn't cost anything to just like connect in a real, genuine way. It's, you don't have to constantly think of posts. Sometimes it's okay to just go into the comment section and say thank you, or I appreciate your thoughts, or, answer a question. That's the stuff that really pays off. Or sometimes when I can't think of a post, I'll just surf around my feed and just do a whole lot of commenting on other people's posts. And sometimes I find myself getting more followers out of doing that than I get from putting up my own posts. So let's turn this parasocial relationship a little more social, right? Like networking isn't about monologuing. Network can be about having a real conversation. And this platform allows for that. You can slide into DMs, So why not slide into DMs? It's productive.
Yeah, I'd say too, like LinkedIn is one of the places where you can kind of hack the system and talk to people you would never be able to normally talk to. And that's why I tell a lot of people, like when I did like 105 episodes or whatever of my podcast, and I never got massive amount of viewership, but it allowed me to meet people like Jeff Pabst, Clinton Sparks. I interviewed the CEO of Atari. I interviewed senior people from game publishers and, some esports professionals who I really looked up to who've won tournaments like the Dota 2 International. I had like 2 or 3 TI winners on my podcast and things like that too. There's not a chance the CEO of Atari would have said yes unless I had a LinkedIn profile. Like as a however old I was at the time, like a 25-year-old random kid who's never had corporate biz experience. There's no way they're going to say yes to that unless I was able to set myself up with a LinkedIn and, set myself up with a podcast and, just reach out and chat to these people. I think you'll be surprised, like if you just message some people, what they're going to reply with, especially when you look at the executives who are active on here who don't really post. There are a lot of them. I can't really name a lot of them off the top of my head, but if you just go clicking through LinkedIn, go and open some companies you'd like to talk to and just go take a look at some profiles. You can see, it's pretty easy to stalk people on LinkedIn. You can see people's, I don't mean stalk as in that way, but it's pretty easy to socially stalk people on LinkedIn where you can see what their activity is. So you can just go have a click through and just go take a look at, look, this person's from, Warner Brothers, and I've really wanted to reach out to talk to someone from forever, and I can see that they're liking and commenting quite a lot on different posts. Why don't I just reach out, send them a thoughtful message and see if they reply? There's no way you're going to be able to send a letter to Warner Brothers HQ or just rock up and someone's going to talk to you, but you could definitely do that on LinkedIn.
The podcast hack is the ultimate hack too. I did the same thing when Web3 really started blowing up. Like it's literally free to sign up for an account on Anchor and start distributing, right? Literally free. You can go on Fiverr and get a logo for $5. You can speak into your Apple microphone that comes with your phone and do it on voice memo. Like it's so easy. Go on Google Meets and record it, right? It's so cheap and easy to do a podcast, and you're so much more likely to sit down for a half hour with somebody way above your weight by saying, hey, come onto my podcast. Oh, I've got a podcast about Web3. Like I only did 12 episodes of it because I got busy and I kind of fell off of it. But I was able to talk to 12 people who most likely would not give me the time of day. But I was like, I got a podcast and 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. Want to come on my podcast? And I think there was only a couple no's, which was pretty awesome. So I'm going to do the podcast hack the rest of my life as long as it keeps working.
Oh, so yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So we're going to spend the rest of the LinkedIn Live talking exactly about who said no and target smashing the DMs, Phil. Is that what you're saying?
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go flame war some people. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying, Erin, before I cut you off?
Oh yeah, no worries at all. And the other point I wanted to make, connecting to what Phil said, is if you aren't very comfortable in front of the camera, if you're not comfortable in front of audio forms, you can also still interview them and turn it into a newsletter. You can have a newsletter and have a written form. Always create content that fits within your strengths and what you're comfortable with. Not everyone can do my broadcast job, because if everyone could do it, let me tell you, I would be out of a job at this point. So it's okay if you're not comfortable with doing that, or even speaking via audio. You know yourself best. So figure that out. But I think the biggest takeaway from podcasting or interviewing is just essentially a value exchange, right? Like the one thing I've learned from networking is, and even when it comes to the brand deals that I've helped to acquire for myself, helped to acquire for XED, or my agent got for me, right? Was like understanding my value and communicating to those brands and communicating to people what the value is. So in my content, right, one of the things that I do is if I post about hosting a show, I also post about me as a producer and producing the show. I've gotten work and gigs and deals from being the strength of me having my producer experience. And then on top of it, the other value that's a benefit is I'm a host too. And a lot of times when I get deals for hosting, you get a 2-for-1 special, but people only know that because I show that. Then also I've gotten B2B because I also work on the business side and I talk a lot about the business side. And sometimes that's not even via video. Sometimes it's written. So it's not only based upon your audience, but it's also based upon what you're comfortable with. But at the end of the day, networking is about treating people with respect, actually getting to know human beings and not, my whole philosophy is I'm going to treat everyone with respect. Whether you're the janitor or CEO, you're going to get the same level of respect. Boundaries, right? I think another thing that's important too is boundaries and understanding boundaries. Because I don't know if anyone on LinkedIn is listening, but it would be great if there was a button for talent where you can engage with talent, but if you want to specifically hire them for something, it automatically goes into their email for their agent. That's been kind of a struggle point for me because I can't be so accessible at sometimes because I am talent. So I can't talk and negotiate certain things because that's what my agent's for. But I think that for everyone else who may not have the same kind of constructs that I have, as long as you're treating people with respect, it's respecting boundaries, you're being yourself, and also have fun with it too, right? If you're not going to have fun, it's going to get tiring. Have fun meeting new people and getting to know people as well.
Just a shout out to the audience too. If anyone wants to come up and start asking some questions, you can feel free to, there's like a little raise your hand thing and then you can come up and ask us or ask a couple of questions, push back or tell Phil you don't want to come on his podcast, whichever one you want.
Please come on my podcast once I start it up again.
It's funny, Erin. It's so true what you're saying about messages. It really sucks when you can't. I just don't have time to reply to everyone, and I really want to because I remember what it was like on the other side. I remember like my first ever kind of gig. I was a commentator for Counter-Strike and Battlefield 2 on a thing called Net Game Radio, which is obviously before we had enough internet bandwidth to stream video. We were streaming basically a radio station. I remember I sent out like 180 sponsorship requests and I got about 3 no's and that was it. And I was like, damn, this sucks.
Yeah, well, I don't think that it helps, and this is for anybody from LinkedIn who might be listening to. I get so much spam in my inbox. Like, I get it. You work at a mobile development company, but I don't need 30 of those a day. It makes it really easy to lose the high-quality messages. And I do like that they've done the focused and then the other, because it does a pretty good job on the other of only being ones that are not super useful. But still, a lot of them are able to break through to focused. So I don't know how they're doing it, but man, like I'm just looking through my inbox right now, and it's like I've got one at 1 p.m., 12:59 p.m., 11:31 a.m., 11:22 a.m., 10:42 a.m. These are all unreads, and I don't think I recognize any of these people. So, yeah, spam is definitely an issue.
There was this tweet that I retweeted yesterday. I just had it open. I read out word for word. Breaking, new LinkedIn connection, hoping 4th reminder message following up on other reminder messages about doing a quick call about something will do the trick.
Hey, I see you might have missed my messages before. I was hoping to be able to connect. No, I didn't miss your messages. I don't want your messages.
Yeah, after the 15th question, I'll surely come on and sign you up on the 16th time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Bernardo, hey mate, how are you? Welcome.
Hey, I'm doing well. I hope I'm coming through okay.
Yeah, all good, brother. What's up?
Awesome. Hey, so I'm, as it says like here on my little title below me, I'm the staff advisor for a university esports club, and we're trying to vie for varsity. With a lot of the market adjustments and changes happening in professional esports, what sort of advice would you all give for the type of outreach or active outreach, like when looking for our space in the world of sponsors and partners, now that K-12 and K-20 infrastructure for esports is starting to backfill in North America.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the number one thing that people get wrong, so you can learn it by not doing it wrong, is don't spend 5 paragraphs telling your story. The best way to ask for a sponsorship is to be like, here's a sentence of who we are. Here's a sentence of our value. Here's what we're looking for from you. Make the ask as specific as possible. And then if you want more information, I can follow up with more information or attach a quick one sheet or something like that. Like, the more you make it easy for somebody to understand what they're reading, the higher your success rate will be. But even then, cold outreach sucks, and it's always going to suck.
Also, another thing too is kind of going back to value proposition, right? Like, the one thing, because I completely understand what a little bit of what you're going through, because with XSET, right, and just overall esports industry, to be very frank and honest, more brands and VC are just not, they don't care about esports anymore, really. And I don't blame them, because the ROI on it has not been solid. And so, one of the things that we focus on is like figuring out another value proposition, that yes, we have esports teams, or yes, there is, a sector of esports that we're involved in. But there has to be another value proposition that you can include into it, so that it will grab the attention of people. So like, one of the biggest value propositions that we have at XSET, and of course, this is an area that we're improving in and fixing and fine tuning every day. And as a chief culture officer, I work a lot on our DE&I stuff. DE&I and culture and community are some of the biggest value points that we have. And we always convey and communicate that we target communities that we feel that esports does not really do a good job of supporting overall. And so, because we've been able to effectively do that as executives individually and with some of the other companies we worked at, a lot of these investors and as well as sponsors are very interested in like the manner and the way that we go about it when it comes to our DE&I initiatives. Even though like our initiatives may not be the biggest or the most glamorous, right? Because, due to social media numbers, but we focus on support with purpose. That is our philosophy when it comes to everything that we do. And so because of that, some of our sponsors, and even current sponsors that we have, they say, okay, you guys may have esports. That's a value in the overall proposition that you guys give, but we really like your DE&I stuff. And so when that happens, we say, okay, we have this main product and main sector of the organization that we want to push, but now we can implement the other value that they found that we conveyed, that we can include in the overall deal. I work with, I don't know if he's still in the chat, Tim Mulligan. Shout out to Tim Mulligan. He's our head of sales, our VP head of sales. And so that's what we do all the time when it comes to sponsorships, just because people are starting to deviate from esports. So you got to really spend additional time learning and understanding like what are some of the other facets of your program or product that you think will be appealing to sponsors. So because you may be able to pull them in that way, and esports will just be a piece of that overall deal of sponsorship deal versus being the main focus.
Advice follows a lot of what Phil said, which is just get to the point as succinctly as possible. Like Phil was saying, his inbox is slammed with a lot of messages, a lot of other people's emails and inboxes slammed. So if you can summarize and then provide next steps as quickly as possible, you're doing a lot of work for them. The hardest messages I always get is like, I want to get a job in esports. How do I do it? Or I want to get a sponsor. How do I do it? Because it's not specific whatsoever. So you're relying on the person on the other end to understand who you are, to go and look up your company, to understand how their brand might fit you. And a lot of that's obviously too hard basket if they're getting a lot of other great pitches, which already give them the answers directly. So yeah, I think we got some got some good answers from all of us up here. Hopefully it's been helpful, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate it.
No sweat. All right. Jackson, what's going on, man? How are you?
We should also shout out from me to Tim Mulligan too. I just feel like everyone should shout out Tim Mulligan at least once during a LinkedIn Live.
Yeah, he's amazing. Talk about a man who brings in deals. Like he's really great at sales.
He's
Shout
a
out
charming
Tim.
guy.
Never met him.
He's very good.
Never met him, but he's a great guy. Shout out Tim. Let's go.
Give him a follow.
This is now the
Chris.
Tim Mulligan
He's great.
podcast and the Phil Ranchers podcast. Let's go.
We'll take it.
We'll take it. Jackson, what's going on, man? How are you?
Hey guys, you can hear me all good?
Sir.
Sweet.
Yep.
So I run a esports center in Wellington, New Zealand. We do a bit of education stuff. So we do holiday programs, education on games, programming, and we also do the esports tournaments and whatnot. But because I'm running it daily, I'm finding it hard to figure out how to post on social media and build that confidence or create good quality posts. How do you guys fit that into like your regular days if you're doing a lot of other stuff?
For me, what really helped, like I was saying before, when I turned it into a sort of formula, was figuring out what that formula was after a while for me. In the beginning, it was literally just, if I read an interesting article, because I research the industry a lot, I'll share it. Or if I'm going to an event or going to be at something or had something happen in my business, professional life, I would share it and then go from there. And then now it's just much more natural to me that I kind of have a cadence where I know what I'm going to share and when I'm going to share it. After a while, I guess it just becomes second nature. But in the beginning, you know, like what Phil and Erin was saying, if you understand your why, like why are you sharing content? And then after that, I'd say if you can categorize what kind of content you'd like to share, maybe taking that formulaic approach would make it a bit easier. So you could say to yourself, hey, okay, for the month of Feb, what I really want to do is go hardcore at LinkedIn, and I'm going to commit to posting 3 times per week. That means once per week, I'm going to post a photo or something that happened at my space. Once per week, I'm going to post an article that I found was pretty interesting. And then the third post per week, I'm going to post, for example, sort of a memory or on this day or a back in time within the industry. And there you go. That's your 3 posts per week. And you can just make sure you keep filling those out. Sometimes I'll crank them all, not all of them, but sometimes I'll crank out a whole bunch of those posts just in one afternoon. You know, sometimes I'll schedule up 10 plus posts. You can schedule directly through LinkedIn now as well. Obviously, I'm not waking up at 1 a.m. every single day to make a post. So you can schedule them directly through LinkedIn, or you can use something like Buffer if you would like. I prefer LinkedIn because you can tag people on LinkedIn, where Buffer you can only tag companies. And yeah, just go from there. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful, man.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of scheduling just in general. Like every once in a while, I'll still go through the exercise like once a month of just trying to write down what I do every second of every day. And it's tedious for that day, but it's a cool exercise because it makes you realize how much time you do actually have. When I'm like, all right, oh my God, I'm so busy, I don't have time to sleep. And then I'm like, oh wait, I was checking my email for like an hour and a half. I did not need to check my email for an hour and a half. What I need to do is unsubscribe to all the crap that I shouldn't be doing, right? And you start to realize where there's efficiencies in your day and where things aren't bringing you joy and where you can optimize. So the way that I used to do it when I was scheduling every day was just, I had a set time where that was my LinkedIn time. And it was almost like a job, right? Clock in, clock out to my LinkedIn time. Of course, now I'm saying that at a time in my life where I literally can't find a half hour sometimes. And the way that I do LinkedIn posts sometimes for this is like literally when I'm sitting on the couch, when I have like an hour free to like watch TV with my wife, I'm writing LinkedIn on my phone while she's watching the TV. And, you know, sometimes you have to give up that little bit of extra in order to get this part done. But also don't put so much pressure on yourself. If it doesn't fit in your day, it doesn't fit in your day. Like find what brings you joy and value.
Yeah, and to add on to what Phil and Chris said, one thing that I do is actually in general, I actually carry around a notebook everywhere I go because I find inspiration in daily interactions. So whether it's me having a conversation, sometimes I have one-on-one coffee sessions with other friends, other people in the industry. Sometimes I hear a conversation when I'm out and about. I'm like, actually, that's interesting. Or sometimes I see content posted on other platforms. I'm like, that's interesting. That there is a perspective to that. So then it also helps with like starting to create more evergreen conversations that have some connection to timely manners. That's been kind of like my aim. Like, I just don't have the time to look up what's the trending. To be honest, I'm sorry, LinkedIn people, but I don't usually have the time to look up what the trending topics are on in LinkedIn. I'm very appreciative that my manager on LinkedIn is able to send it. But I usually don't really post about those things because a lot of times they don't really correlate with my industry or kind of like what I want to talk about. But when you have that book of inspiration and you have these kind of things you can talk about, and you're constantly taking everyday interactions and making it into content, when you have that book, it's so easy to like figure out, okay, what can I talk about today? And then I schedule on LinkedIn, but I'm not going to lie, I'm also the Hootsuite queen. Like, I take a lot of my videos and I'll do via Hootsuite just because I can post it on multiple platforms, and some of the content I repurpose for all platforms. I do it that way, so I'm not stressing. And then one habit I started to do is I wake up 1 hour earlier every day. And I just spend that hour thinking, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to post about? And then I start writing about it, and then I post it. And I don't worry all the time about, is it going to resonate? Is it going to not resonate? I just kind of just spend time saying, okay, what am I seeing on the platform? What are the conversations? Can I contribute to it? Or what's something that's been on my mind and on my chest that I just want to get out? So it may require, definitely schedule. That's like the key. And then also sometimes you have to set aside specific hours to post. You may need to set 30 minutes every single day, mark in your calendar to respond to comments, to respond to other people's posts. Maybe you need to wake up an hour earlier to do that and to get posts. If you put it on your actual work calendar, it's going to force you to do it and to ensure that you don't actually book anything else during that time for it.
What do you reckon, Jackson? Any other follow-ups, man? Helpful?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I guess the biggest point for me is that I'm working during the day, and whether it's customer interaction throughout the whole day, long business hours, and then trying to get the motivation to make new posts when I'm mostly working, which is, I guess, the hardest point for me. But I guess it's also like, how do I create it? Like, Chris, you post a lot of like really cool, good-looking things on your personal page, but how do I differentiate that to the business? Like, should the business be posting more, or doesn't really matter? You've figured out your kind of flow, Chris?
Yeah. Are you asking like personal page versus company page?
Yeah.
I've personally had no success posting on company page. I tried a lot it was either 2021 or 2022 to even become like a content syndicate. We paid a person to do like a weekly kind of news wrap-up stuff. We also licensed Mark Kai's weekly wrap-ups and put them across there as well the day after he posted, and cross-post a lot of my content. Just didn't really work as much. I found the company ones are a bit more dry and more for like, hey, we hired these people, or, you know, here's a company milestone or something like that. Whereas you can do a little bit of that Twitter-esque, you know, mindless, whatever comes to your mind that you want to post about, or like Phil was saying with the passionate rambling and rants on your own profile, because it's attached to a person. So yeah, for me, I've seen all success on my own profile and really no success posting on my business or any of our clients as well. We've had a few clients where we've run clients' business pages as well as their personal ones, and personal ones just cut through so much more, which is also kind of funny because on LinkedIn, there's actually no way to advertise a personal post or a personal page, only ways to advertise business. So it seems like business is more like Facebook, much more pay to play and a bit more dry, whereas personal, you can do what you want.
Sweet. That's really good. Thanks, guys.
No worries, man. Gabriel, welcome. How are you, man?
Hi, I'm Gabriel, co-founder of Esports African News, and nice to be here. My original question was close to Jackson's question about posting between company and individual, but I'll switch it. Since you've answered that question, I'll switch it to tournament. So I'm speaking from the African perspective. We struggle to get visibility on international journeys of esports. I'm just wondering, what can we do differently to get the attraction that Asia, Europe, and America gets on these international esports journeys? Because we kind of struggle to even get involved international events? What can we do differently to get that visibility, that interest and attracting us to be part or just to be at the table?
That's the operative question of social media, right? Is how do I get more attention? So I think there's a few strategies that you can employ. But of course, if it was easy, then everyone would do it and everyone would be famous. And it's not easy. So I don't want to say that it's, oh, just do this and you'll be fine, because that would be me totally lying to your face, which I don't want to do. But there's a few things we've found, especially when people are trying to kind of cross borders with their content. One is, can you find a supporter in the territories that you want to reach who can, say, co-stream your content or make content around it, or kind of shoutcast from their Twitch page and share? Like, there's ways to kind of do that syndicated method through digital means that can help reach different audiences there. Two is, make sure your content is internationalized, right? Make sure that your metadata is accessible in different languages. Sometimes that can be as simple as Google Translate, especially on YouTube. They do a really good job of that. So, and subtitling, of course, helps. Harder to do live, but a lot of the platforms will do it live for you. And then also just reach out to people, right? Like, if there's somebody who you want to watch it in another country because you think it'll move the needle, hit them up on LinkedIn or hit her up on LinkedIn and say, hey, I've got an event on this day for this. I think it would be cool for your brand. Why don't you tune in for this one, see what you think? You'll get a lot of no's before you get yeses, but the yeses that you get will be impactful.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, for me, it's all about storytelling. It seems to really be what it is. If you can find a way, and I know that storytelling can be seen as really expensive. Like if you go all the way to, say, how the UFC does it with their embedded, where they follow their fighters throughout the entire week before they play, like that's expensive. But if you can find some way to draw a story out of yourself, out of your company, out of the people who are competing, then that's where you're going to get a lot more traction as well. People love to hear a good story. People love to hear a success story. So yeah, finding some way to do some sort of storytelling. And like I said before, that's what LinkedIn said they're trying to push a lot more in the algorithm as well, that kind of storytelling narrative. And I don't think they said that word exactly, but from all the examples they sent through, it really seems like storytelling to me.
Yeah, and human interest stories are really important, not only from a media and also press perspective, but it's also actually really important for brands. One of the things that we, starting to see, especially in a lot of the conversations I'm having with Tim Mulligan, is, like I said, people are shying away from just esports. And so another way too to get that exposure point is, figure out what are some of those unique stories of the individuals in the actual tournament. Like what's the human interest story that can resonate to publications, to media, to also to just brands. Also, are there publications that want someone to talk about esports, but maybe from a regional perspective, and maybe you and your company have that additional perspective that you can provide, because there's so many different areas and countries that we haven't even fully tapped into for esports. I mean, it took literally a pro player on the big stage in Evo to show people that Pakistan actually has a really big fighting game scene and Tekken scene, and they have some really solid players from there. So there is a great opportunity to shed a light and help to be kind of that individual that helps others understand the market. But anyone who's involved in the esports space and even in the gaming space, and this may be a little bit harsh to say, but there are facets of esports and there's facets of even tournaments and pro players that right now in its current standings is not marketable, because it focuses a lot on competition and doesn't implement some of those human interest stories or branding perspectives of the players that goes beyond just them being pro players. And that's kind of a shift that we're seeing and we have to see. So that's another thing to keep in mind. There's multiple different ways that you can present what you're doing to help you get the visibility on so many different platforms and forums.
Great. Thank you so much. Just the last one. we've got this human story. I think I've learned from Chris. I followed you a bit over the period, and we've got this human story about competition in the athletes from across the continent. It's like a documentary which we've commissioned. It will be out about the 20th of February. Obviously, I'll be leaning on you lot to sort of try and share it wider to have that story seen by many more people. So I'd say thank you for this opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, keen to see, man. Keen to see. Hopefully you don't drop the bag like UFC did with Francis Ngannou's story. His story was amazing. That should have been turned into a documentary years ago. So I'm sure there's a lot of other kind of similar stories from your region as well of esports pros who've come from similar backgrounds. So yeah, keen to see.
Thank you.
We had another couple of people wanting to come on to ask questions, but they've pulled out. I think they must have had to go. But yeah, if anyone else wants to ask a question, we've got time for probably one more before we go to Jet. Phil, what's on this week for you, brother? Anything interesting coming up?
Right now we're Brand Deal City, which is rare for January, or I guess it's February now, but we kind of got bombarded, which was weird because it was kind of a light holiday season for it. So yeah, I'm trying to fulfill that. And then Brand Army, we've got a $5 million creator fund that we're working our way through. And as the people in the creator economy may sympathize, when the deal gets done, that's the beginning of the story. Execution is the story, right? So even though it's a blessing that we're able to get this business, with the fact that we have to execute this over this year it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work.
Is that kind of similar? I don't know about the Creative Fund. Is that kind of similar in concept to the Misfits Creative Fund? Like, are you making businesses for and on behalf of creators?
No, this is specifically for a fan funding platform. So think of like Patreon, but a little bit more content driven. It's one of those platforms. You can check it out, brandarmy.com. But it's also a fully managed service. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. Interesting. Hey, Zach, what's going on, man? What do you want to ask?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for putting this whole thing together. I love these talks. It's been great. Just a quick question, and I'm not totally sure if this is the perfect question for this particular call, but I thought you guys would probably all have some insight on it. I've heard a lot of people talking about, and it was mentioned earlier, how a lot of brands are cooling on esports because they felt like they haven't had a great ROI. And there's been a lot of theorizing about, obviously every case is individually specific, but broad spectrum, if there are things that we can take away from that sentiment. And I just wanted to see if you guys had any perspective on like what it was that you thought that that caused like a lack of ROI, if you saw any kind of patterns among your brands or just other, things that you've seen kind of in the news. It's really interesting to me. I feel like, to me, it's always felt like a bit of a creative problem or a storytelling problem, like you were just mentioning, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, preface this by saying I actually I'm planning a senior industry event in June, potentially hosted by FaZe, where we're going to do some roundtables. And this is actually one of the topics I want to talk about with senior people. Now, for everyone listening, the roundtable won't be published, but that's just because we want senior people to talk freely without, feeling like they're being watched from outsiders. But I'm going to publish, I guess, the themes of the topics to talk about. So I'm really excited for that because we're going to be talking about, like I said, exactly the question you asked. And I don't think it's a straightforward one. We talked about this a lot last week with the $100 million sold audio spaces I did with Jeff Pabst, who was the Chief Revenue Officer at FaZe, and Arena Shames, who was recently the Chief Revenue Officer at G2. So I'll be posting that in the next 24 hours or so. It just got uploaded to YouTube overnight. If you just search like business and games, $100 million sold on LinkedIn, you'll probably find it there. And those two people are definitely very experienced and able to give their feedback because they're the ones that sold those deals. A lot of their advice really was there's just not conversion for the brands that are coming through. So esports is often great as a loss leader, as a user acquisition and retention tool for a publisher, but not always that great for everyone else in the value chain. So some of the questions that came through to the people in there as well, which is also a topic for a roundtable I want to do in June in LA, is around support from the publishers, how the publishers could and should work with the teams and people together. Jeff's answer is they're not going to, so just stop asking the question. But I think more directly, because I'm kind of flip-flopping around here, more directly to your question about ROI and esports, a lot of it from what I've seen from brands is they're just not seeing conversion. Esports teams will sometimes explain that to the brand. Hey, you're coming with us for a branding play, for a messaging play, for inspiring the next generation. You're not going to see direct conversion. Some sometimes are conveniently ignoring the facts because they've got sales targets to hit. And some brands just get caught up in the hype and the interest of esports. Wow, it's a billion-dollar industry. It's fast growing. Look at all these people at IM Katowice screaming, drinking beer, watching CSGO. Like, it's really awesome. The passion's fantastic. It's cool. There's some really good stories behind it. But sometimes the money doesn't follow with all of that. And I think people don't see, and I didn't see when I was new to the industry, yes, it's awesome that esports is a billion-dollar industry, but that's compared to like $155 billion for video games. Like, it's not even, 1% of the size of the video games industry. It's nowhere near the size of the influencers who are inside it and things like that as well. So I think, and we talked about this last week too, a lot of it is kind of VC over professionalization and pushing the industry too far as to where it can actually hold itself up. They've thrown fuel on the fire, but thrown almost a little bit too much fuel. So there's still lots of value and purpose in esports. There's still millions of players. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of awesome storylines, and there's money to be made from sponsors and for sponsees. But sometimes it's just a bit too much. The rounds have sometimes been too big. The executives are paid too much. The players are paid too much to be able to actually be supported on the ROI. Whereas, if a brand would pay 1/3 less or 1/2 as much as they did, they might be very happy with the results that came through. But if they're paying top dollar, they expect top returns.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go ahead.
I'll keep it short. Yeah. Overinflation is an issue, and then over-indexing on contextualizing numbers, right? Like, what I mean by that is kind of like what Chris said, where it's like, esports made this amount of money. Our viewership got this amount, right? But it's like, okay, if your viewership for this tournament or this initiative got this amount, how many from that number were co-streams? How many, like, contextually, I think that's kind of it's an over-indexing issue that we've seen in esports, but we're seeing a course correct that's happening right now as well. So that was also part of the problem as well.
Yeah, and I'll be quick on this one too, because I know Randall has a question. But also from day one of esports, they were being compared to gaming influencers. And that was just an unrealistic bar to try to get over, because there's just so many more gaming influencers, like chatters, the ninjas of the world, the Dr. Disrespects of the world. They get such incredible reach, and their pricing and conversion is so high that it's just really hard to put that up against these skill players who are not necessarily focused on entertainment and streaming 80 hours a week. And so when you talk about direct ROI, when somebody goes, well, why don't I just buy a Tim the Tap Man instead? It's really hard to come up with that answer. You're just not always going to get the same, at least direct conversion on streams or same sort of sponsorship reach that you would if you just go straight influencer. So they were kind of backed into a corner from day one.
What's up, Randall? Last question of the morning for me, night or afternoon/night for everyone else. What's going on, man?
Love it. Thank you guys for the time. Early on in this conversation, someone, may have been Erin, mentioned documenting the process. And I kind of have some, projects that I'm working on where I'm 100% going to be documenting that process moving forward. But I'm curious to know if you guys have an opinion on how to share things that I've done in the past, like 2-3 years where I've been kind of silent. I don't really want to do a dump of here's all my cool accomplishments that kind of show that's part of the story type of thing where, I feel maybe it's self-centered or, people don't care. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
So one of the things that I did is I think one of the biggest advice that I got actually from my friend Brandon Painter is about you have to have a balance actually between being egocentric and also providing value to the audience, right? Because at the end of the day, you are sharing your experiences, you are talking about things that you like, so you still have to kind of put yourself in that position. But figure out what's the value from people learning about that. So one example I did was I took my experience working in the music industry. I was 24 years old producing programs for TV. And if anyone knows TV, like someone being that young, it's rare to be able to have someone that young lead a whole series project for TV. And so like, I was like, hey, how do I convey that? How do I convey me working in the industry? And how do I convey the fact that like the first series I created, Cardi B was the first episode. So instead of focusing on this is what I did well, this is my accomplishment, I actually took it as a moment where I was like, you know what? Even though this was like a great time for me, it also like personally was a horrible time, like mental health wise. Like I wasn't happy. I struggled with depression during that time. And so I kind of took it as like these things, like these were great things that I did, but here's kind of like a human interest perspective that people can resonate with. There's a lot of people who have amazing accomplishments, have done amazing things, or have done, leveled up quickly in an industry, but were unhappy during the process. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to be honest. I was unhappy in that process, but that also explains why I'm happy now. And what I'm doing now is, the tone is a lot different. So you can take some of this stuff and have it be more human interest stories, or it could be case studies that you're saying like, hey, I worked on this and this is why this works well. So it's all about figuring how do you take your past experience and provide value. Maybe that value is entertainment. Maybe that value is information, or maybe you just want to share a story. I wouldn't worry too much about whether you're making it about yourself, because at the end of the day, it's your story. So it's going to be about you, and just focus on like, what is a connecting value point that you can give to your audience based off of that past experience.
That was so well said. I don't think I have anything I could add.
That was honestly super, super amazing. I relate to a lot of that perfectly. And I think you honestly just gave me the perfect approach to how to create the content, but mostly value driven and focused. But thank you so much. I love it.
Something you said there, Erin, it was really funny. It's like trying to explain to people how big of a deal something isn't always as easy as you might think. I've had this before with, I can't specifically remember what it is, but there was this one piece of content I made, like an infographic or a carousel or something, and I've shared it 4 times because I think the information in it is, to be honest, so fucking amazing and it should blow people's minds, but it just never seems to hit. And I try different copy every time, and I'm trying, without trying to be direct, I'm trying to like scream at my followers to be like, this is so important, you should read this. And it just never, sometimes it just doesn't hit. And, I think I've got to give up basically.
Chris, you just described my stand-up comedy career to a T. I was just like, this is funny, right? It's funny, right? And then 10 years later, I'm like, I should go into business.
Just stand on stage yelling at people, why aren't you laughing? This is hilarious.
This is so funny. Well, now I realized I can make my toddlers laugh. It's easier. You just put on a funny voice and make a weird face.
Damn, dad jokes always win. All right, we got to wrap this one up. Erin, what do you got happening in the next couple of weeks?
Doing a panel for NASCAR on Friday. They have a summit in LA talking about tech and implementation of tech in live events. And then I am hosting the NFL's gaming event. It is their HBCU Madden tournament during Super Bowl week. So that's the next thing I have coming up.
Awesome. Sweet. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. There'll be another one of these announced pretty soon. If you want to suggest any topics or come on as a co-host or a guest, whatever, just message me. I'm always open. The thing I'm mostly interested in is just interesting stuff to talk about. I didn't talk about it before, but most of the reason I stopped doing my last podcast is I got bored of my own podcast. So I thought, hey, if I'm getting bored, other people are going to get bored too. So if we got a good stream of interesting topics and interesting guests like what we have today, I'm not going to get bored of talking. So thanks, Phil. Thanks, Erin. And we'll catch you all again soon.
Thanks, all.
Thank you.